In this video, we're going to be talking about hearing and the anatomical structure of the ear. Hearing is the body's way of transducing sound waves. Before we get into our physiological understanding of that function, let's talk about the anatomical structures of the ear itself. So here we have the different parts of the ear. I'm basically just going to name them here in this section of the video, and then we'll dive deeper into each part of the ear and the different functions of these pieces of the ear. So at the external ear, we have the auricle and the auditory canal. This leads to the tympanic membrane, which marks the divide between the external and middle ear. In the middle ear, we have the tympanic cavity, which is an air-filled space. And then we have the three ossicles of the ear, which are the three smallest bones in the body. We have the malleus, incus, and stapes. And then we also have the eustachian tube, which connects the middle ear to the pharynx. So leading us into from here, the inner ear, we have the stapes that's connected. It's part of the middle ear, but it's connected to the oval window on the cochlea. The cochlea is part of the inner ear. And the cochlea also has a round window, which is covered in a membrane. And we also have the vestibule and the vestibulocochlear nerve, which takes any neural signals from the cochlea and the vestibule and takes these to the brain. Let's dive deeper into the different sections of the ear and we can talk about them in more detail. So starting with the external ear, again, we have the auricle and the auditory canal. The auricle is that outer fleshy part of the ear that's at the side of the head. The curves of the auricle direct sound to the auditory canal. The auditory canal enters the skull at the external auditory meatus, which is part of the temporal bone. And inside of the auditory canal, earwax can form. The auditory canal is lined with stratified epithelium, and the epithelium has sebaceous glands that produce earwax. And the function of earwax is just to help trap debris as well as lubricate the canal. So from here, we'll dive deeper into the middle ear, and of course, the tympanic membrane is the boundary between these two sections of the ear. You can see the middle ear pictured here, starting with the tympanic membrane, and it's the space between the tympanic membrane and the cochlea, which is shown here in blue. And we have the tympanic cavity, which is the air-filled space of the middle ear. And then the three ossicles of the ear, the malleus, incus, and stapes. This roughly translates to hammer, anvil, and stirrup, which can help you remember them because it's how they look. And the malleus is fixed on the tympanic membrane. They're all connected. Again, the stapes is in the oval window of the cochlea. We also have in the middle ear here the eustachian tube, which connects the middle ear to the pharynx. It helps to regulate pressure of the air on the tympanic membrane, and it's normally closed. However, whenever we swallow or yawn or otherwise contract the pharynx muscles, it opens. And it also serves the function of helping to drain fluid out of the middle ear and into the pharynx, which is an important function. If fluid builds up in the middle ear, it can lead to problems with hearing and potentially ear infections. Let's dive deeper now into the inner ear. The inner ear can sometimes also be called the bony labyrinth, and it includes the cochlea, which serves the function of hearing. The vestibule serves the function of balance, and the vestibulocochlear nerve, cranial nerve 8, which takes any neural signals from the vestibule and the cochlea to the brain. We're going to dive much deeper into the cochlea here in the coming slides. So you can see the cochlea pictured here. In the top left, you can see the three ossicles of the middle ear. You can see the stapes is connected to the cochlea via the oval window. The cochlea itself is shaped like a spiral or a snail, and it's filled with fluid. It has three fluid-filled canals, the scala vestibuli, which is the ascending canal, the scala tympani, which is the descending canal, and the cochlear duct, which lies in between these two other canals. Diving deeper, let's talk about hearing in more detail, auditory transduction. So hearing obviously starts with a sound, an external sound. The sound waves move into the auditory canal and they vibrate the tympanic membrane. Now, like I explained, the malleus is fixed on the tympanic membrane. So when the tympanic membrane vibrates, then these three connected ossicles also vibrate. And the stapes, which is connected to the cochlea at the oval window, starts to move like a piston in that oval window. So here you can see that stapes in the oval window pictured here. And this movement of the stapes in and out helps to create a wave in the fluid within the cochlea, starting at the scala vestibuli and then the scala tympani. And this leads to the round window, which has a membrane that covers it. So fluid doesn't escape, but the round window starts to move in and out. And then the cochlear duct in between these two canals, the scala vestibuli and the scala tympani, is really important in the function of hearing because it contains the neurons for auditory transduction. We're going to dive deeper into that structure in the next slides. But first, let's look at the cross section of the cochlea so we can get a better understanding of how these structures look. So we have the scala vestibuli, which is the ascending tract, and the scala tympani, which is the descending tract. And then lying between them, we have the cochlear duct. And inside the cochlear duct, we have a very important structure called the organ of Corti. And we'll dive deeper into that right here. So we have the organ of Corti, which you can see in these different images first with the cochlea from far away, and as these images get larger, you're looking closer and closer at the organ of Corti. So the organ of Corti is the main receptor for hearing. It lies on top of the basilar membrane, which I'll show you right there. And the basilar membrane waves or ripples in response to the movement of the fluid inside of the cochlea. It responds differently to different frequencies. So different parts of the basilar membrane will move depending on the frequency of the sound, which helps us with our perception of the frequency of the sound that we're hearing. So we have another image here of the organ of Corti. The movement of the basilar membrane gets transmitted into electric impulses. So let's talk about how that happens. We have receptor cells in the organ of Corti, which are also known as hair cells, and they have stereocilia connected to a tectorial membrane on top here. So the tectorial membrane situated above them holds these stereocilia in place. And so as the basilar membrane down beneath the organ of Corti is rippling, these are being bent by that movement. Since the tops don't move, they're fixed at the tectorial membrane. Instead, they bend in response to this movement. This creates a response. The mechanical gated channels in the hair cell membrane open and cations enter. So as we know, cations have a positive charge, and this leads to depolarization of the hair cell's membrane potential. So nerve impulses are triggered and then they travel through the afferent neurons that are part of the vestibulocochlear nerve. Like I said, that's that cranial nerve 8 that comes out and takes signals from both the vestibule and the cochlea to take them to their corresponding areas in the brain. So the information is then sent to the auditory cortex in the brain. Now we'll dive deeper into problems that can arise in regards to hearing. I said you need a hearing aid. So let's first get into conductive hearing loss. This is the inability to conduct sound waves to that very important organ of Corti. And it can be caused by damage to the tympanic membrane, arthritis of those three ossicles, the three smallest bones, malleus, incus, and stapes, or earwax blocking that auditory canal. There's also sensory neural hearing loss, which can be caused by damaged neural components, maybe the damage to the organ of Corti, maybe damage to the vestibulocochlear nerve, or damage in the brain, in that auditory cortex of the brain. and it can be caused by neurological defects, brain tumors, or exposure to loud sounds over time. So that brings us to our conclusion. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you learned something new in this video. And ultimately, it's just really interesting diving into these structures in our body and how they function that we just get to enjoy every day. However, they're very complex. Thank you again for watching. Here are my works cited. If you want to dive deeper, you can check out some of these sources. And I hope you have a great day.